Well, thank you very much to all of you for being here today. We are here again to talk about the Violence Against Women Act, and it really is a shame that we have gotten to this point, that we have to stand here today to work to pass legislation that has consistently received broad bipartisan approval. The Violence Against Women Act has successfully helped provide life-saving assistance to literally hundreds of thousands of women and families. And every time we have reauthorized this bill, we included bipartisan provisions to address those that are not being protected in some way by it today. However, for some reason this time, some of our colleagues would like to pick and choose who qualifies for this assistance. Why? Well, it's apparently because we have decided in 2012 that we as a country need to be more inclusive when it comes to protecting and providing resources for all women affected by violence. You're going to hear from one of those today. Her name is Deborah. She is the vice chairwoman of the Tulalip tribe in my home state of Washington. She knows and will tell you firsthand about the devastating effects violence can have on women, especially Native women living on reservations. And she knows this should not be a partisan issue. This bill is written to protect the rights of accused abusers while allowing for justice for Native women who are all too often the victims of domestic violence. In fact, in 1 year alone, 34% of Native women will be raped, 39% of Native women will be subjected to domestic violence, and 56% of Native women will marry a non-Indian who most likely would not be liable or held liable for any violent crime committed if these protections are not included in this legislation. For the narrow set of domestic violence crimes laid out in VAWA, tribal governments should be able to hold accountable defendants that have a strong tie to the tribal community. You know, I was here with Senator Boxer and others in 1994 when we first passed this legislation. And since we took that courageous and historic step, VAWA has been a great success in coordinating victims advocates, social service providers, law enforcement professionals to meet the immediate challenges of domestic violence. And along with the bipartisan support, it has received praise from law enforcement officers, prosecutors, judges, victim service providers, faith leaders, healthcare professionals, advocates, survivors. And why has VAWA received such broad bipartisan support? Because it worked. The debate we're having over the provisions in this legislation is a matter of fairness. Where a person lives, their immigration status, who they love, should never determine whether or not a perpetrator of domestic violence is brought to justice. These women don't deserve political theater. Let's get to this bill, get it passed, and make sure that all women and men are protected from domestic violence. Very proud to be here today with Senator Boxer, who's been a champion for many years, and Senator Klobuchar, who's been a lead actionist on this and just knows this issue inside and out, who are standing with me today to urge the Senate to take this up and get it passed quickly and to the President. Thank you. Absolutely. Senator Boxer.
Thank you. I think I'll take the box.
Sorry.
I want to start by thanking Patty Murray for pulling us together, and I'm looking forward to hearing your story, and so proud to be here with Senator Klobuchar, who's a lead on the Judiciary Committee along with my California colleague, Senator Feinstein. If you look over the Old Testament, there's a part there, Mark 12:31, that says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment." Let me say it again. "You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." And then when you look at the New Testament, you hear, of course, the story of the Good Samaritan. So anybody who claims to have in their heart spiritual concern must stand with us, and vote for this bill. 3 women are killed by their abusive partners every single day. 9 women are beaten or injured every day. Since the Violence Against Women passed, have we improved the situation even though it is dire? Yes, we have. Domestic violence has decreased by 53%. So we are talking about a bill that must be reauthorized because it is so critical. And we don't want to see a bill go through that basically limits the ability of people to get the help they need. When they're bleeding on the ground, they shouldn't have to be asked their life story. Their life story is that they've been beaten and they're laying on the ground. I want to tell you a little bit of history. In 1991, Vice President Biden, was Senator Biden, introduced the Violence Against Women Act. And he came to me, I was a House member, and I was so proud. It was before I decided to run for the Senate, and he said, would you carry this bill in the House? Well, I was very, very honored. I was able to get through just a narrow piece of the bill that dealt with violence on college campuses. We got funding for the first time. But then I proudly joined Senator Biden. That year, Patty and I and Diane and remember Carol Mosley Braun, we came to the Senate and we helped Senator Biden get this passed. Since then, VAWA has had overwhelming support. In 2005, the House passed it 415 to 4. And this year, 47 attorneys general signed a bipartisan letter supporting its reauthorization. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories, and I'm going to turn it over to Senator Klobuchar. A mother in Alameda County in California with 2 children had been in a long-term abusive relationship. She separated from her abuser only to be stalked and brutally assaulted. Thankfully, she called 911, and she hid the phone so the police could hear the assaults. The police arrived and arrested her abuser because they had proof from that listening in what was going on. The victim was able to access a family justice center because of VAWA. She got counseling, emergency relocation, and she worked with a deputy DA trained by one of the grants. The victim was pressured not to cooperate with the prosecution. However, prosecutors and investigators who were trained under the Violence Against Women Act helped the victim overcome her fear, and her abuser was convicted. Second story, an immigrant in Los Angeles. A small domestic violence agency in LA responded to a call from a Hispanic woman who was in the emergency room having been stabbed by her boyfriend 19 times while she was 3 months pregnant. During her ordeal, her boyfriend drove her from one part of town to the other, refusing to take her to an emergency room, even though she was losing consciousness and bleeding profusely. She finally jumped out of the car. She screamed for help, stopping an oncoming car. Bystanders called an ambulance. The abuser fled the scene. Her baby, thankfully, was not lost. She recovered. This brave woman fully cooperated with the police. The agency helped her apply for a U visa, and based on her cooperation, she and the child were able to move on to a new life. Now, I had an example of a tribal situation, but I'm not going to go through that because we have someone who's going to give you that, but I will be happy to share what we have learned from our tribes. Very last point. This is important. Some of our colleagues say we're adding new things to this bill, when in actuality, we're not. Every single Violence Against Women Act bill included everybody. It never excluded anyone because of whether they were in the LGBT community. They never excluded anybody because they were in an Indian tribe, okay? What this bill does is it makes it very, very clear. So let us not be told that we're adding anybody. We never, in the Congress, ever excluded anybody. So all that is just a ruse. We need this bill. We need it now, and we're going to fight for it with every breath that we have. And it's just an honor to bring Senator Klobuchar to the podium.
Oh, thank you very much, Senator Boxer. Thank you, Senator Murray, both of you for your leadership. So I wasn't here in 1994 when this bill was drafted, but 4 years later, in 1998, I was elected the chief prosecutor for Minnesota's biggest county, and I saw firsthand the help that the Violence Against Women Act gave our office, gave the police officers, and mostly gave the victims of domestic violence. Police officers learned that they should photograph things at scenes when they got there because they didn't know when a victim might get scared and decide not to testify. That was because of training, because of VAWA. People learned that there were kids at the scene that they had to work with, that they couldn't just say, oh, there's a kid at the scene. That's what used to happen. They didn't do anything about it because they started looking and realized that kids that grew up in homes where there's violence, 76 times more likely to commit crimes themselves. That's why whenever you walked into our office, in the prosecutor's office, you'd see a big poster, and it was a picture of a woman with a Band-Aid on her nose. She was holding a little baby, and the words underneath said, beat your wife, and it's your kid that goes to jail. Because we learned so much and have taken so much better action because of the Violence Against Women Act. And over the years, when it's been reauthorized, always on a bipartisan basis, we've made changes. We've done things to work with the times, just like this bill that we have before us includes the internet stalking provision that Senator Hutchinson and I introduced. It's incredibly important. Just like we're looking at some of the changes to the tribal courts. Why is that? We've learned that 50% of American Indian women are married to people who are not American Indian. And what happens is, in anyone like my state, like the state of Washington, state of California, that has a number of tribes, what you realize is that when these crimes get committed on the reservations, while you do have state court and sometimes federal jurisdiction, sometimes things don't happen for those crimes unless you're right there. All this bill does is give it concurrent jurisdiction, doesn't take anything away from the federal courts, doesn't take anything away from the state, and allow these tribal courts the jurisdiction. Look at what it does with the visas. I cannot tell you the number of cases we had when I was a prosecutor. One I remember distinctly, 14-year-old girl raped by an adult man. She's afraid to come forward. You know why? He says, I'm going to turn your mom in on immigration, right? Is that what we want to have happen? We want to just let that guy, a rapist, go free because people are afraid? That's why this bill is so important to get passed. I'll just end with one story, and that's something that happened when I was home last December. An officer, Sean Schneider, officer in Lake City, Minnesota, was called to a scene. And it was a 17-year-old girl who was being abused by her boyfriend. He went up to the front door, and that man shot him in the head, killed him, shot him in the head. That officer basically sacrificed his life for that 17-year-old girl. And I was at that funeral and saw that officer's two young boys and the little girl with a little blue dress with stars covering it go down that middle aisle of the church. And when you see that, you realize that violence against women isn't just about one victim. It's about an entire family, an entire community. And you know what? That officer would have gone to that door if it was an American Indian victim, right? He would have gone there if it was an immigrant victim. He would have gone there if it was a GLBT victim. He would not have discriminated, and that's why this bill is so important, and we must get it passed. We have 61 authors. There's no reason we can't get it through the United States Senate. Thank you.
And now it's really my honor to introduce to you Vice Chairwoman Deborah Parker, very courageous in coming forward today to talk personally about why this is so important to her and to so many other Native American women. Deborah?
Thank you, Senator Murray, Senator Boxer, and Senator Klobuchar. Okay. Health Datitude, Sitsayaltsa Sitsta Dohlelep. Good morning, my name is Deborah Parker. I am an enrolled member of the Tulalip Tribes of the state of Washington. I am currently serving as the Vice Chairwoman of the Tulalip Tribes. I am here today to support the Violence Against Women Act. I was here on an environmental protection issue on Monday and did not plan on providing my story while at the nation's capital. However, I could not allow another day of silence to continue. Yesterday, I shared with Senator Murray the reasons why the Violence Against Women Act is so important to our Native American women. I did not expect that I would be sharing my own personal story. I am a Native American statistic. I am a survivor of sexual and physical violence. My story starts in the 70s as a toddler. You may wonder how do I remember when this occurred? I was the size of a couch cushion, a red velvet, approximately 2.5 feet couch cushion. One of the many girls violated and attacked by a man who had no boundaries or regards for a little child's life, my life. The man responsible was never convicted. In the early 80s, at a young age, I was asked to babysit my auntie's children. During the late hours of the evening, she arrived, but was not alone. Instead of packing my things to go home, my sense was to quickly grab the children. The 4 or 5 men that followed my auntie home raped her. I had to protect the children and hide. I could not save my auntie. I only heard her cries. Today is the first time that I have ever shared this story. She died at a young age. The perpetrators were never prosecuted. During this time on a reservation, there was no real law enforcement. And because I know the life of a Native woman was short, I fought hard to attend college in the early 90s and study criminal justice so that I could be one to protect our women. However, I am only one, and we still have no real protection for women on our reservations. In the late 90s, I returned from college and began a program to help young female survivors. We have saved many lives during the creation of this program. However, one of my girls, Sophia, was murdered on my reservation by her partner. I still remember this day very strongly. And yet another one of our young girls took her life. A majority of our girls have struggled with sexual and domestic violence, not once, but repeatedly. My question for Congress was and has always been, why did you not protect me or my family? Why is my life and the life of so many other Native American women less important? It is now 2012. I am urging Congress to uphold the U.S. Constitution and honor U.S. treaty agreements to provide protection, education, health, and safety of our Indigenous men and women of this country. Please support the Violence Against Women Act and send a strong message across the country that violence against Native American women is unlawful and is not acceptable in any of our lands. Our tribal courts will work with you to ensure that violators are accountable and victims are made whole and well. Tigwitsi, Haichka, Pisha, Miigwech, thank you for listening to my story. I am blessed to be alive today. I send my love and prayers to all of the other victims and survivors of sexual and domestic violence. Thank you.
I think Deborah said it for so many of us. No one should be left out of this bill. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. It shouldn't be about someone else's bill. It should be about the bill that is before that we are trying to bring before the Senate with 61 co-sponsors in a bipartisan way to make sure that Deborah and every other woman or man in this country that is a victim of domestic violence doesn't have to tell their story 10, 20, or 30 years from today. Senator Reid will determine the floor strategy, but we are moving forward on this bill. It, again, has 61 co-sponsors. It has passed this Senate before on a bipartisan voice vote and gone to a Republican president to be signed. There is no reason that it should be any different this time.
I just want to ask, one thing if I can, because we've been in talks, all the women, Democratic women have been with our male colleagues who are very supportive. Here's the point. When you have a bill that, as Senator Murray said, has a filibuster-proof number of co-sponsors, and that has addressed all these issues, and that, by the way, is no different than other bills in this sense, no other version of the bill has ever excluded any woman. There was a Supreme Court case that says we have to clarify the Indian Native American piece, and that's what they did in the committee. And there's anti-discrimination clause added. Remember, there's no reason to have an amendment process when this bill excludes no one, nor did the other bills ever exclude anyone. So I would hope that we wouldn't have to have a series of amendments because, frankly, the committee, with the leadership of Senator Leahy, Senator Klobuchar, Feinstein, and I'm leaving others out, but those two women I know played a huge role in writing this bill.
Senators, House Republicans are going to be unveiling their own version of this legislation in about an hour. Is that an encouraging sign, or is it your sense that Republicans are going to sort of throw the policy disputes like this one off the Commons area?
Well, obviously, we hope that the House puts forward a bill that the Senate has in a bipartisan way. That's how this has always been written, how it's always been done, and how it's always passed. So that is an extremely important criteria. And we also want to make sure that they don't move us backwards and not protect people like Deborah.
And from the very beginning, this bill was introduced with Senator Leahy and Senator Crapo, so it has enjoyed bipartisan support from the very beginning.
And I would say, having gone through the highway bill saga, I think there's a lesson there. The highway bill, transportation bill, came out of my committee last year, and because of the House dragging its feet, we have 3 million jobs in jeopardy right now. Let us not put the women of this country in jeopardy because the House wants to write a Republican-only bill and for the first time, perhaps exclude certain categories of women from it. You know, I read you the Old Testament, the New Testament. Read it yourself. It doesn't say love your neighbor except if they're this color or that orientation or that, you know, fit this particular profile. It says love thy neighbor as you would love thyself. And the Good Samaritan certainly spells it out. So we have a message for our House friends. Why not just introduce the same bill that, as Senator Klobuchar points out, is bipartisan? Why not make sure that we continue to include everybody rather than exclude anybody?
Yes.
Can I ask you just on the timing of this? This bill or the law expired several months ago. You're now coming forward with a big push for it. Just as the political rhetoric was all about the war on women, at the same time, put a number of provisions in here that you know Republicans would likely oppose and that potentially threaten the bill itself. So,
In the bipartisan bill that's in front of us?
well, yeah.
What does it do? What did you say?
Why would they oppose provisions that we have a number of Republican authors on?
Because I don't know, they said that they do. They're concerned about the immigration visa provisions. You certainly are well aware that they are opposed to that or have concerns with it.
Again, I want to remind all of us that this has 61 co-sponsors on a bipartisan basis. We have moved it forward as we always have.
Let me just say one more
Does
word.
it-
No, I just,
You're saying there's not opposition to this, right?
what?
Are you questioning if there's opposition, Republican opposition to it?
I am, why don't you ask the question that you're
So
trying?
the question is, there is sort of an appearance that maybe, maybe you are trying to take political advantage of this bill.
I'm trying
by
to.
moving it so many months after it expired, as the rhetoric is about the war on women, and you're putting provisions in here that invite Republicans to oppose it.
No. I will say this very clearly. We are moving forward a bill that needs to be reauthorized, that we have done in the past in a bipartisan way, very clearly, and with bipartisan support signed by Republican presidents. We would like to do the same right now, and there is no reason that we shouldn't be able to with 61 co-sponsors. So we are not creating a war on this bill. We are questioning why anyone else would.
And could I also add that if you look back at the record, how many hearings we had on this bill over the last 2 years on a number of different issues to get ready for this bill. So this wasn't something that we just conjured up this month. This has been long in the making and long in the waiting. And when you look at some of these issues that they are raising, I'm sorry, but there's a reason that there are Republicans on this bill, because they know that it's the right thing to do. You heard Deborah's story. That's not the right thing to do something when you have a court case out there on the tribal jurisdiction. It was a thing we had to do. Or the issue of the visas, when in fact all this is about is 5,000 visas, ones that were already issued in the past few years but simply weren't used. So we're technically simply reusing the numbers of visas that had been issued but not used. So it's not like we did some radical thing that would cause the Republicans to oppose it. To the contrary, we got a number of Republicans on the bill.
Can I say something about this in response to you? Where were those same Republican voices when VAWA was introduced so many times and passed so many times? It included everyone. The bills included everyone. No woman was excluded. So how can you even ask a question that implies that somehow we're introducing a bill that will fail when we are also now including everyone? That's important. They keep saying we're adding protections. No version of VAWA that passed ever excluded anyone. And we are just making sure that it's clarified in this particular bill. And in light of the Supreme Court case on the tribes, it's necessary.
The U visas were added in 2000 with bipartisan support.
Yeah, in terms of partisan, I am frankly shocked that we are facing a Republican partisan issue back at us on this. That we are here today pushing forward a bipartisan bill. We are not making it partisan. We are asking why anyone on the other side would oppose it. We're moving forward. Yeah.
Yesterday, Senator Cornyn said he was going to be offering an amendment that would provide for testing for some 400,000 rape kits. Wondering what you guys make of what.
Look, I have long supported increasing the number of rape kits. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. We have pushed long and hard to add additional funding for rape kits. I'm happy to work with Senator Cornyn on that if he feels that is a high-profile issue. But that should not deter from the Violence Against Women Act moving forward.
Right. It's important to note that every one of us supports more funding for rape kits, and I really welcome his support. That's going to be terrifically helpful to Patty Murray on the Appropriations Committee. A rape kit happens after there's a rape. The Violence Against Women Act is put together to avoid domestic violence.
Senators, do you have assurances from the Republican response to this
Well, all I can say again is we have 61 co-sponsors of this bill as written, and we are moving forward. We hope that it can come up and get quickly passed in the Senate. Right thing to do for this country, right thing to do for victims of violence, certainly right for a message, not just here in this country, but worldwide, that we are standing up in this country to show the rest of the world that we do not, in any way, shape, or form, whether it's Deborah or any other woman, are going to stand by and watch violence occur to women.
Last question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.